The machine elves were fucking with me, so I had to come outside, and it's kind of a weird sensation because I'm not used to being outside during the daylight of my own volition. Now, partially it's because there hasn't been daylight at all, and partially because it has been winter and I usually don't go outside of my own volition in the winter over here. But it's also because I just haven't really been feeling like taking a lot of walks recently. Now, you know me, I like taking night walks, I like taking normal walks. I just like walking around the city, but recently the fancy just hasn't struck me. I've just been staying at home playing RuneScape, haven't stepped outside to appreciate the fresh air and ambience, I guess. I do have to wear headphones generally because otherwise I get overstimulated. Because I know a lot of people get overstimulated by brightness and lights, and so do I to a certain extent. But for me the more problematic thing has always been the sounds. So when I'm outside I'm generally wearing headphones, and that's just how I prefer to be. But it's really nice being outside sometimes. It's really nice just walking around the city. It's really nice just taking in all of my surroundings. Just look around this place. There's a really distinct charm, and this is the centerpiece of the city I've lived in for my whole life. So I've been here a lot of times. This is just kind of where you have to go through when you're going from one side of the city to the other, because everything is kind of built around this place. And it looks fucking awesome, it looks fucking sick. And there's just a certain air that there could be something here, right? There's so much empty space, right? And they constantly set up things here. They constantly set up small concerts and fairs and so on, right? So very often this place isn't empty, but there's constantly the sensation that it could be more full. I'm wearing my normal pants and I have my Doc Martens on. And if you know me, you know I generally like wearing jeans more than I like wearing sweatpants. But sweatpants have a very distinct advantage. And I don't find them more comfortable to wear. Putting them on takes way less time than putting on jeans. So if you're in gaming mode, right, and don't want your naked ass against the fucking chair for the whole day, it's very easier to just put on sweatpants. And with the Doc Martens, right, they're beat to shit. I don't know if it's visible on camera, but they're still fucking broken. They're a size too big because I'm a fucking retard, and they've been worn out by just years of being worn. And that's kind of how I like my boots. I like my boots beat to shit. And I know it's kind of wasteful to a degree, but it's also like I don't throw them away until they literally aren't wearable anymore. So it is kind of wasteful, but it's kind of a sacrifice I'm willing to make for the aesthetic that I really appreciate to an extent. It's just, to me, there's something about clothes being worn to shreds that is really appealing, and is just a great aesthetic. But it's also kind of sad to a disproportionate extent, because I know that I'll never buy Doc Martens again. Because for one, they've gotten really fucking expensive, right? They're almost double the price they were when I first bought mine. But then to top that off, the reason they've gotten expensive is they've become a normie mainstream boot, right? And when I got mine, they were still like really heavily associated with the punk subculture, and I really liked that part. But nowadays, they're just something that everyone wears, and they're just something that I lacked interest in. So the next time I need to buy more boots, I'm probably gonna buy some combat boots or something fucking cool, because these dogs will probably reach the end of their lifespan in a year or two, and I'll have to think about getting new boots again. This is the river that the whole city is built around. I think there was a crossing or something where you could sometimes just go over the river fairly easily, and that's why the city was built. At least that's what I remember from the history I learned in school. And on the other side of the river, there's the shopping district of the entire city. It's not really visible on camera because it's kind of too disappointing for me to want to show closely, because it's been completely rebuilt during my lifetime. It used to be just a few small buildings, right? There was one small shopping center and there was a second small shopping center, and if you wanted like food and stuff you would go to one, if you wanted like clothes and stuff you would go to the other one. It was really nice, it was really comfy, it was like there was something real going on there, you know. And then they built another shopping center, then they demolished one, then rebuilt it, then they demolished the other one, and then they rebuilt that one. And I've been to actual giant shopping centers, and they're kind of cool in a way, right? They're an absurd symbol of excess, right? But they have like their own ecosystem going on. They feel like places where you could live if you so needed to, right? And that's kind of appealing, right? You have like these giant complexes of like multiple giant buildings, and it's like this kind of feels alive to an extent. It's disgusting, but it's alive. And then when I go to like smaller shopping centers, it's like, oh, actual exchange is going on here. I can for a second pretend that I'm not a part of some giant capitalist megastructure, and I can act as if I'm just giving my money to someone who owns a store and who's importing some kids to enjoy, right? It's like, you can for a second pretend that things are working as they should. But with the shopping centers that you have over there, none of that exists. It's never like you feel like you're a part of an ecosystem of any kind. It feels like you're in giant buildings looking for a way out, and the way out involves just navigating their labyrinthine structures, right? Going on some fucking quest to find some ancient artifact in like some fucking maze of just things they're trying to market themselves to, right? It's like they're grocery stores, right? But there aren't like multiple functioning restaurants, and the restaurants that there are there, right, are this weird middle ground between like fine dining and fast food, right? So, or they're just fast food. So it's kind of not some place you want to be. Now the one that I have any type of respect for, which is the one over there, right? That one is kind of neat because its entire top floor is a cinema. So when you go to a cinema, you get to have a few cool experiences, right? When I was a kid, the experience I really liked was just going for pizza after I saw a movie. It was really nice, right? That's like one of the few useful parts of no, actually I pointed at the wrong building. I meant the other one because I'm fucking retarded. I meant that building over there. Yeah, I'm just distracted by fucking recording. But anyway, that one has the top floor. That's the fucking cinema, right? But yeah, anyway, you can go to the fucking pizza place. You can get some pizza, right? And it's like a whole experience. It's like, sure, it's some decadent capitalism, right? But if you're there with some cool people, right, or if you're there with just some people, then it's something that you can enjoy. Also, this crowd just picked up some candy or something. Wild stuff, insane stuff. Hope you have a good time. But yeah, oh, there's some fireworks here for some fucking reason. But anyway, that's just a fun thing to do as a kid. And then when you're an adult, right, and you're going to an evening showing of a movie, the rest of the shopping center will be closed by the time that the movie is done, right? So you have to go out like this back door, right, until you get to navigate these stairs that are like service stairs most of the time. But since it's the night and the shopping center is closed, those are like your stairs. It's like a fucking cool liminal space kinda. So there are some experiences that can organically come out of like this type of design, right? And they're few and far between, but they give like a tiny bit of life to an otherwise completely desolate building. But otherwise it's just running through like a gauntlet of commercialism designed to make getting to the one place you want to go as inconvenient as possible. Because you have to come to the shopping district to get it, right? Because all the stores are around here, even if they aren't in one of the centers, the stores are around here, right? So you have to first make your fucking trek here, and then you're put into these like really alienating, really overstimulating buildings that don't feel like they're there to help you in any way, right? They're just like the most naked form of developing capitalism, right? And you're just stuck running a gauntlet of like different sounds and smells and fucking marketing tactics, all just fucking targeting you, right? And you really become a targeted fucking individual when you do that. And I don't really like it. It doesn't really give me any joy to be a part of. I would much rather be in any other state of capitalism, really. Because not only do I have a taste of like the post-Soviet era, where it didn't make sense to have giant like commercial spaces at all. There's only one giant commercial space, and it was somewhat outside the city, right? It was right next to the city border, and it was just an event to go there. It was an adventure, and it was one of those like, it wasn't a really giant shopping center, right? It wasn't one of the actually impressive ones, but it was just big enough to be like, to feel alive in its own way, right? It felt like an actual ecosystem, and that to me is interesting in like these really commercial spaces, right? Is when they start, like the scales tip, and it feels like you're a part of like some type of story, instead of you're a subject to some interests you couldn't even begin to comprehend, right? But then, as I kept growing, that type of structure kept encroaching more and more onto where I live. And now, if I want to get most things, if I want to get my fucking mail, if I want to get my fucking... Usually I don't go here for groceries for obvious reasons, but sometimes if I want to get groceries and I have to get something else too, I'll have to come here. If I want to go to the cinema, I can go to the real cinema, that's just a building that shows you movies, right? Or I can go here, you know, depending on what is showing what movie, right? And it's like, it's just, there's too many things that force me to this place, even though it's kind of devastating, because I've seen what it used to be, and what it used to be was so much more human, you know. But maybe I'm just a retard. Maybe it's just that I can cope with capitalism if it has a human face in it, or maybe I can cope with capitalism if it's so far beyond human that it's incomprehensible as something else other than like a natural aspect of reality. Maybe I'm just a retard that this stage of capitalist development, when it's like, oh, here's capitalism and you don't have a human face and you don't have some meta nature going on, it's just fucking disappointing, really. I've noticed that a lot of people don't want to be alone with their thoughts. And there's no really convenient explanation for it, right? If it was just normies that felt this way, I could be like, oh, these people are all over-socialized, or these people just have guilty consciences, or something like that. It would be really easy to rationalize away. And if it was just mentally ill people, it would be like, oh, yeah, these people have had traumas, right, so on and so on and so on. And it's hard to deal with mental illness and silence, and sometimes you have to ward off your thoughts. But it seems like this applies to everyone across the neurotypical to neurodivergent spectrum. It seems like in any category of people, you can find a really large subsection of people who can't be alone with their thoughts. And this is something that has not really ever resonated with me. I've always been comfortable when I'm alone with my thoughts. Like, sure, I get paranoid and it's not always fun, but for me the real unstable times are when I can't be alone with my thoughts. When I have to listen to what other people are saying, and I have to come to conclusions, and I have to process information. That's when I reach really unstable conclusions, I guess, right? Because that's when I start thinking, is there something wrong with me? Is there something I should feel bad about? Is there something that I need to be worried about? And if I need to be worried about it, then why am I not worried? And if I don't need to worry about it, then why am I worried? And so on and so on and so on. But when I'm alone, that's always when it's peaceful. And really the issue with being in silence and not doing anything and just thinking for me is that I get bored in time. Or I get tired because I think too much. But if I can just run through all of my thoughts and not do it too fast, it's always a nice time. I like just having time to think. And I'm not blaming anyone who doesn't. There are so many good reasons for why you wouldn't want to be alone with your thoughts, right? I'm not gonna say that that's a bad thing to not want to be. But for me, that's always the calm. And the storm is whenever I have to go and hear people conceptualize me, or hear people have to live lives and so on and so on. I don't even know where I'm going with this. It's just something I've been wondering about. I've been reading a lot of theory and watching a lot of Adam Curtis lately, and I've come to the conclusion that what we're currently living in is a state of mandatory individualism. Like if you want to make art, making art is something that's like sold to you, right? Though, if you buy these products, right, you can be an artist of some kind, right? If you're a YouTuber, if you want to be a YouTuber, right, you have to buy this microphone, and you have to buy this webcam, and you have to buy this thing and that thing and that thing, right? These are like products sold to you, so you're allowed to make art. Because the culture, right, that we're living in, that's going to be inherently critical of any types of art, right? Because that's another thing that has like propagated. It's like the idea that critique is somehow an essential good, right? So everyone is going to critique you, and capitalism is ready and willing to be like, hey, look, here are better implements to do what you want to do by, right? So you have this phenomenon of like 15, 16-year-olds going like, hey, I want to make YouTube videos, I need an expensive microphone. Or you have like college students being like, oh, I need expensive internet because otherwise I can't stream. When you can stream perfectly well with a setup that costs maybe $50 and just normal internet, right? Like, you don't need to get that fancy with it. I mean, as long as you have a capable computer in the first place, but like streaming isn't really as heavyweight as it used to be. So you have this paradox, right, where it's easier and easier to express yourself, but the capitalist marketing, right, and the critique of the current culture just combine into such an insidious monster that you're supposed to be spending money when you want to make art. And since you have to spend money to make art, right, you have to earn money back through the art, right? You can't just make something for fun. Since you're forced to spend all of this money on it, it means that you're also going to be forced to make that money back. Or otherwise it would just be a waste, you know, you bought all of these expensive implements, so now you have to be an artist. You can't just be a person who enjoys making art. You have to be a commercial figure, you have to market yourself, right? You have to make art your job, necessarily, because you can't make art otherwise, you just couldn't afford it. And of course there's also the aspect that the capitalist system we live in, right, is just unbearable. You don't want to be a part of it, you don't want to work a service job doing absolutely nothing for 8 hours, and you constantly have to deal with the worst types of people because they're your customers, right? So they're entitled and so on and so on and so on, right? This is a well-documented phenomenon. So you have this situation, right, where everyone wants to leave capitalism, but the only way to leave capitalism is to internalize it, right? You have to become both the subject and the object of capitalism, right? You have to become an artist who is now a consumer, because you have to consume the implements, right? You have to have the best paints, and you have to have the best pens and the best video equipment and the best audio equipment or whatever you want to do. You have to have the best. But you're also the object of capitalism, because you not only do you have to buy the equipment, right, you now also have to sell yourself. Your entire life now has to be about what's the best way to just sell your soul and how can you make money doing art, right? Because you can't just make a song, right? You can't just jam out with your friend for fun. That's not allowable. You have to publicize it. You have to try to get as many people as possible to care, because you spent all of this money on doing it, right? And you have to do it because there's no other way out of capitalism. So this radical tendency, right? This radical tendency of being completely unsatisfied with the system and the opportunities it presents has manifested into being more deeply and deeply ingrained with capitalism. And this is just a part of the mandatory individualism, right? It's not that people are forced into this cycle of artistic expression for just the purpose of capital, right? It's not just that, it's just like when people are working, right? Like you moved on from cubicles, right? Which are obviously a really degrading situation to be in, right? Like you're forced into a literally the cheapest possible box, right? And then you have to do your work in a box, and you're expected to like personalize your box because you need to be attached to the box. And then you moved from a cubicle to, okay, you can't even have a cubicle anymore, right? You're either doing work in like an open plan office, because the problem was obviously the boxes, right? The problem wasn't that people didn't have privacy or that people didn't have proper spaces, right, to engage with each other. The problem was that there were boxes, so if you remove the boxes, then you solve the problem. Obviously not, right? You just exacerbate the problem. Now people don't even have their boxes anymore. And you're still, like, to an extent from what I can divine from people's experiences, right? You're still to an extent expected to express yourself in such an environment, which is just terminally impossible, right? It's the most stifling possible environment for any sort of personality, and yet you're expected to have a personality, right? Because you can't just do a job, and that's not sufficient enough for capitalism. Because capitalism doesn't just want you to be a productive unit. Capitalism wants you to surrender your whole being to it, right? So you have to further integrate your job into your personal life, right? And giving rise to this like ridiculous notion of work-life balance, right? Here's what work-life balance is: you go to work, you do your work, you go home, you have your life, right? That's what people have been sold, right? That's what's supposed to be capitalism, right? Because it's like, okay, sure, you have to work a job and it's shitty, but you get to go home and you get to have a good life, right? No, that doesn't exist anymore. Now you have work-life balance, where the edges of your capitalistic production and the edges of your private life are becoming increasingly more and more frayed. So you no longer know what you can even expect, right? And it's just a horror show, right? You can't just be a happy drone either, right? When you had cubicles, you could just be a happy drone, right? You could just punch into your job, punch out, leave, right? You didn't really have to engage too much with your surroundings. And sure, that was alienating, that was isolating. But as time goes on, people notice, like, oh, these people are getting alienated and isolated. What we need to do is have more social interaction, right? But you can't just have free interaction. You can't have any type of actual expression. Actual expression can only take place outside of work, right? And since everything is tied into your work, that means that actual expression just can't take place. But anyway, that aside, right? People now, right, have to have work friends, right? That's no longer something that you have a choice over. If you don't get along with the people around, if you're not attractive and charismatic and social, then you just aren't allowed to do the job, right? You won't get hired or you'll get fired because you don't fit into the culture, right? no matter how good you're at your job. And then when you get promoted, right, it's not who's the most capable of managing, right? It's either two really bad choices, right? It's either who's the most social, right, as in who gets along the best with the current powers, or who is the best at their former job, right? Because then if someone is good at their former job, it means that they have to completely relearn what they have, right, and change their skill set and take on additional responsibility, because you can't just be good at your job. You have to be ambitious and strive to improve and climb up the corporate ladder and just do something completely different that you didn't even sign up for, right? And that's the goal. That's the hope that you have, right? Instead of being a person who can have some degree of freedom, you have to get more entangled and be a manager and make slightly more money and have shitloads of more stress, right? It's just no part of the system is worth it. But you have this mandatory individualism, right? People don't want to see others as workers, right? Because it's obviously dehumanizing, right? Like the concept of a worker is inherently evil, right? It's just, oh, this person serves a purpose to me, right? People don't want to feel that way, so they have to be people, right? But they still have to perform the role of workers. So this leads to this like really intense contradiction where you have to be both a person and a worker. So being a person becomes your job. And just forcing people into being people means that they'll never be able to be who they want to be. You know, they'll always have to be whatever capitalism demands of them. And that's fucked up. It's all fucking eldritch. It's incomprehensible horror that even the most pessimistic fucking critics of capitalism could not anticipate, right? Maybe Nick Land could have anticipated this. Nick Land definitely anticipated this. He just fucking expressed it in an incomprehensible way, probably. I want to talk a bit about the currents of propaganda I've been seeing on YouTube recently. Because as many of you know, I'm an actual retard, right? Which means that I use the home page on YouTube, I don't use my subscriptions page. Which means that some really strange stuff ends up in my YouTube box. And then sometimes I click on it. And recently YouTube has really been pushing me 2 channels. One is Business Insider, right, which is obviously a propaganda outlet, right? It's called Business Insider. It's meant to be propaganda, just in the most conceited way possible way, right? And the other thing I've been getting recommended is South China Morning Post, which is a similarly just raw and obvious propaganda outlet. And the interesting thing for me rather, is the difference between these 2 outlets, right? Because they're both ostensibly news media, right, which has some veneer of being the news state, right? It has some veneer of expressing various events that can be significant and so on, right? And the way they approach these events is so diametrically opposed in the funniest possible way to me. So the archetypical Business Insider story from the few that I've seen, right, I'm not fully aware of it because I don't habitually make time to watch this fucking garbage, right? But from the few stories I've seen, like the formula they use, right, the narrative they promote goes as such, right? We are currently living in a mass-produced industrial society, right? And it's good that this society exists, right? This society should be spread and it should be propagated as wide as possible, right? But there are these emerging fields, right, which are basically framed as like, oh, this is new real estate for our capitalist systems, right? This is new real estate for the potential future mass producers, right? But right now, these are luxury items. Right now, these are special artifacts to an extent, right? Because they're not mass produced, they have some type of magic in them, right? This is like a pseudo communist fiction, right? It's like, okay, so this item has labor value, and it's more valuable because it has more labor put into it, right? And look, this mass production is good, right? It can facilitate their society, but the thing that gives things value, right, is the labor put into them. So the series just showcases like various items, right? Like one was some fucking bird, fucking, not feather thing, but some weird wool, right? It was made from like a really specific type of bird, and it was supposed to be really good, right? And the other I saw was this like fabric that was made from like the inside of like lotus flowers. And these are both like really magical objects, right? Because with one you have to go scour the fucking plains of some weird fucking islands, right? Which are the only places that these birds inhabit. And then you get your like special wool from their discarded nests. And then you can repurpose that to like have a blanket, have a warm fluffy blanket. I guess that's cool. And the other one is like, okay, so you have to hand weave like lotus, like the insides of a lotus, right? And then when you do it properly, you end up with this like really nice fabric. So all of these things are like taking some ostensibly magical product of nature, right? Like, oh, these are the insides of a lotus flower, right? That's a fucking cool ass concept, right? Or this is like weird fur that birds use to make warm nests for their offspring, right? That's also kind of magical. And then they repurpose those things into consumer products. And the fact that people put their labor into it supposedly makes them even more magical, according to these narratives, right? And it's always like an opportunity presented as such, right? It's always presented as an opportunity for like future mass industrial production, right? Oh, maybe we'll be able to synthetically replicate this, or maybe we'll be able to find a way to mass produce these things, right? And then we can all have these magical objects, right? But it's inherently contradictory, right? Because the thing that imbues them with this magic isn't just their quality, although they probably have above average quality in many ways, right? It's the fact that they require this fucking arcane modes of production to acquire, right? It feels like you're casting some fucking forbidden ritual, right? To acquire these items, and that's as the series itself recognizes, right? Is what gives these items the value they have. But then it always ends up with like this hope that you too, the mass consumer, can have a hold of items like these in the future, right? It's like this weird contradiction, right? Not only is capitalism good, it's always looking for things, right? There's always like this fucking multi-eyed beast staring at any fucking piece of magic in the world and seeing what it can do with those things, and it's like this really opportunist feeling to it, right? Because when you're watching something like this, you go like, oh, that if that feels so good, then I also want that, right? You're supposed to envy those objects, not because they're rare, not because they're like well made, but they're also supposedly, right, the peak of comfort and the peak of some really positive sensation. And then capitalism promises, right, is that it can give you those sensations without all of that labor. But it's forever caught in this contradiction, where if no matter what kind of sensation mass production can give you, it's never going to have the same appeal as the sensations that just a personal like production can give you, or that these like really laborious complex processes can give you. And that's really interesting for me to observe, because it's the instabilities of capitalism, to borrow a Marxist term, right, that are at war with themselves at every possible moment. And generally I don't really believe in like things like this, right, because I'm autistic. I don't really have that much care for like fucking handcrafted items, and I'm fine with what I have generally, right? But just seeing these processes at play, right, not having to like look for these, but rather having them presented to me as propaganda. It's making me just think about it a bit more than I would usually, right? And the most insane thing is when over in America, right, you have this unstable capitalist system in conflict with itself. Over in China, you're seeing a similar thing, right? Because the stories that the South China Morning Post, or whatever the fuck it's called, promotes, like, all have this really, like, traditional angle to them, right? It's like this is an example of people working hard to make a harmonious society, or this is look how what lengths someone is willing to go to be healthy and not succumb to decadence, or like just stuff like that, just like stories that have like this weird conservative bent to them, right? It's like we are more cohesive society than those in the West, right? Oftentimes, and like, look, you have this social issue in the West. Well, we have a solution here in the East, right? If you too were this, you had it's like if you also had a communist society, or a state communist society, or a state capitalist society, whatever the fucking you want to call it, right? But if you too abided by the principles of the Chinese Communist Party, then you could also have a traditional, conservative, strong society, right? Because strength doesn't come from your capitalist decadence, it comes from our socialist harmonies, right? And so on and so on. So you see this, so on the other side, right, you see this idea that like this socialism too is in conflict with itself. Because socialism is supposed to be like this liberatory force, right? It's supposed to free the working peoples. But since this narrative is impossible to represent, right, it will be easily seen as propaganda. The angle they have to go for is like, okay, you don't get liberation under socialism, but you get stability, you get traditional values, right? You get a conservative, cohesive society. And that contrast to me is really fucking funny. Because it's just, in a really organic way, just through the power of propaganda, demonstrates how, no matter what kind of authoritarian system you have, it's not gonna be stable. It's always gonna be fighting with itself. And that to me, doesn't have one concrete meaning, but it plays a part in a rich tapestry, you know. It plays a part in a very rich, very varied tapestry. As you probably noticed if you're an attentive viewer, I'm not in my usual stomping grounds, right? This isn't where I usually walk around in. It's too plain, too flat, right? It's too much like a suburb. Because I am in the suburbs right now, and it will relate to things I'm gonna have things to say about, but right now I'm next to a park located on the grounds of a mansion, right? There used to be a mansion here, and this area has now been transformed into a suburb in the most naked transition of power you could ever imagine, right? But in this park surrounding a mansion, in this suburb, there are yearly punk and rock festivals, right? Where you come and you listen to punk bands, you listen to metal bands, right? And you interact with other people in the culture, right? And this to me is really fucking funny. This to me is just the funniest fucking occurrence, right? Where if you want to come to a big punk event, right, you're gonna come to this mansion in the suburbs, right? Basically, I'll tell you now, this mansion is like a pseudo museum or something like that. I don't quite know what it's currently purposed for, but that's what it seems like to me. And yeah, that's fucking hilarious to me, right? And I've spent some time in these suburbs for various purposes too, like, so this isn't completely unfamiliar territory to me. But I'm here to talk about, actually, I'm gonna fucking explain the punk thing, right? I used to come here every year. I'm stopping now because every year it gets more fucking corporate and the culture gets fucking worse, right? So there's no fucking reason to come here anymore. It's just fucking garbage. And when coronavirus happened, I was just like, I didn't even feel compelled to look up if the event is happening, right? Because I just don't fucking care. probably would have been cancelled, right? But I didn't even fucking care to look it up, and I don't care if and when the next one is happening either. Because it was worthless then, and it's worthless now. But yeah, anyway, I wanted to talk about my country, right? Because there are some really interesting trends that have happened during my lifetime. I hope I managed to explain some of them when I was talking about my experience with the shopping centres, right? Because that is really the most indicative thing, right? Because to an extent I am very, very heavily a product of my environment. Because to an extent I am the model Estonian, at least what was the model Estonian at the time of my birth, right? Like, I'm stubbornly honest, but not so much that would disrupt some social balance, right? I'm always willing to work, at least used to be, right? Right now that tendency has disappeared from me, but even when it comes to like any work I do, I'm always gonna do it right, and I'm not gonna make mistakes. I'm gonna take responsibility if I fuck something up, right? I'm not gonna expect anything from anyone, right? And it's like, all of these types of values are what I was raised into, right? All of these types of values are what the society around me like told me were the right values, right? You can't be sloppy, and you can't be lazy, and you have to be honest. You can't be a liar, right? So I'm not any of those things, right? If I go and do something, I'm gonna do it right. I'm not gonna do a bad job. If I get paid for it, at least, right? Because I'm gonna take responsibility, right? I'm the perfect fucking part of this society. But then, by the time I had grown up enough that I could be a part of this society, right? By the time I was old enough to be able to contribute to any extent, really, the society had changed, right? It was no longer that, like, it was like, okay, you just do a good job, you go home, keep your nose clean, and you're all free, right? But it was like, oh, now you also kind of have to start following the fashions, you know. You kind of have to, like, you can't just do your job well. You have to, like, you can't just get qualifications from wherever you want to get the qualifications, right? And you can't just go to school, right? It was like, oh, you have to do all of these things too now, and right, like, these things were like, going through a system that's fucking completely broken at this point, right? With no promises, and it's like, that's not the condition that someone like me can abide by, you know. And to an extent, right, it's better than it used to be, right? There's a degree of freedom and adaptability and so on and so on and so on, right? It's not just like a competition of, oh, who can be the most, like, who can just work up the ladder the best, right? Even though that's kind of possible here, I guess, like, it's not as bad as it is in the fucking States or anything, right? It's just capitalism working as it's supposed to, you know. But I wasn't really raised into a capitalist system, right? I was raised into a post-communist system. And I was raised with this, like, fear and paranoia that the Soviets or the Russians or whoever would come and invade again, right? That the freedom we had was temporary, so we had to make the most out of it, right? We weren't just a capitalist society. We had to become as liberalized as possible, as fast as possible, so we could have the best possible relations with the West, right? Because the West would come and protect us. If we were a valuable part of their system, they would come and protect us, right? So everyone has to have value as a capitalist, right? You have to be innovative, you have to have a startup, you have to fucking start your own business, and you have to do all of those things, right? But, like, when you're me, right, and when you're raised into a post-communist system where you just keep your nose clean, you don't do anything wrong, you take responsibility, that's not the kind of person who can innovate. That's not the kind of person who can function in a system where you're supposed to be adaptable, right? if capitalism still came up to me like it was supposed to, I guess, in some fucking fantasy land that used to exist at one point in time, and was like, okay, here's a job, you can do it for your whole life, right? The same way that the older people I know have done, basically, right? Here's your job, do it for the rest of your life, just get fucking good at it, right? I'll be like, yeah, I can do that, right? Just let me find the right one, and I'll fucking do it right, and I'll have a stable life, but that's not how the world works anymore, right? It's not how capitalism in an advanced state can function. So this is no longer a society that I can function in, right? And to an extent that's good, because it means I can actively go against society, right? I can be an anarchist rebel, right? I'm not gonna be stuck in the illusory promises of authoritarianism, right? I'm not gonna be like, oh, if everyone just conformed more, then we would be the greatest nation, or whatever the fuck, right? And there's a degree of freedom, right? Especially because we have a very decent welfare state, and I don't have to adapt to a society that doesn't, give me what I expected to an extent, right? Like, no matter how much I contribute to this society, I won't get what I need out of the society, right? And to an extent, it's like, Dotesmite, you're just autistic, right? But to an extent, autism was the ideal when I was growing up, right? Autism was what you were supposed to strive for. Everyone was kinda autistic, right? We lived in fucking Autistville, right? Where the punk rockers, right, read contemporary science fiction and fucking anarchist theory and classical literature and wrote poems, right? That was the punk rock here. And where the fucking establishment, right, was there to modernize the country, right? And the establishment was the biggest proponent of any technological innovation, right? And the revelation for how gone all of these things really were came to me when I was reading an interview with the author of Disco Elysium, because they're from Estonia, right? They're locals here. And what they had said, right, is, or what one of them said rather, is that the sweet stuff is already gone rather, and we now live in Loserville. And that's really fucking accurate, right? The establishment has achieved change right now. We're like the most technologically bleeding edge government in the entire fucking world, right? And it's great, I can sit in my home, right? I can do all my paperwork, I never have to go outside to get fucking any of my papers done. That's fucking great, that's good, I guess that's better than other places, definitely. I can vote from home if I ever felt the need to vote, right? I can participate in civil society without ever leaving my house. You see how ridiculous it sounds, right? You see how ridiculous it sounds? Like this interconnected technological government, right? Really just meant that it exposed itself for what it was, right? Really fast and in a really confident way, right? It's not like, oh, this is a government of the people. It's, oh, this is a government that exists on the computer, right? It's really literally and really obviously a virtual concept, right? It's a thing that exists in a virtual space. And that's a thing that most governments don't want to be honest about, right? Most governments want to have these civic bureaucratic routines, right? Where, oh, you have to come to the government house to get your paperwork done, or you have to go to the voting place to vote, right? And because this strengthens the illusion, right, that the government is some real thing, right, that exists. Instead of just being a entity that contracts various other entities to accomplish some task, right? Whether that task be building a road or fucking social propaganda or whatever the fuck, right? And it's like the punk rock movement, right? It's no longer people who are like fucking the most cultured, right? It's no longer like the artists who are punk rock. Now the people who play punk rock music are the same people who did 30 years ago, which means that they're now fucking old. They're now fucking just old people fucking playing the songs they wrote 30 years ago, right? It's nakedly ontological. There's nothing new and interesting, right? There's nothing coming out of this country, right? And the only things coming out of it are just adaptations to some fucking technological systems that I never felt like such a giant need for, right? I mean, they're helpful, they're nice to have, but like, they're not what I was promised. And then, like, the fucking everything is shit. Everything is just fucking shit. There's like fucking pop music comes from Estonia now. You have fucking Nuplu, right, who's this fucking European hip-hop superstar or whatever the fuck now, who instantly started to make fucking shit music when he blew up, right? You have fucking Tommy Cash from Estonia who's making fucking avant-garde pop or whatever the fuck, right? You have fucking the Rockefeller Street song, that's from Estonia. You have fucking all of these commercial products, these completely fucking illusory fucking temples to consumer culture and to fucking techno capital, right? That's all that's coming from this place. That's all that this country is built to produce now, you know. It's a great fucking neoliberal success story, and yeah, it is. It accomplished everything the neoliberalism wanted to accomplish, you know, but like, the culture, right, wasn't interesting when I was a kid. Because when I was a kid, it was already mythological, right? You had these mythological punk rockers, right? You had these mythological poets and writers and all of these composers and various like cultural figures, right? It's like, oh, you live in Estonia, look, here's where the fucking culture comes from. We're at the top of culture, we're at the top of technology, we're at the top of fucking governance and everything, and we're at the top of sports even occasionally, right? And it was all of this like vast national mythology, right? And it wasn't ever like an imperialist thing, because we're a small country, right? We have 1.5 million people or something, right? So there was always this mythology, right? Look, we're the fucking best. We're so fucking great, and we're gonna adapt exactly how we need to serve global capitalism, right? We're gonna play their game the best way we can, because that's how we maintain our independence. And the funny thing is, right, when I have talked to the Russians living here, right, they never had a sense that the Soviet Union would come back or Russia would come invade Estonia, right? They never had any sense like that, right? They never even had an inkling that was going to be possible. Even though the news media here was talking like that, even though every like native Estonian was so fucking obsessed with this narrative that we need NATO, we need US support, because otherwise the Soviets will come invade. Look what they did to Ukraine, right, when that happened. Like, it was this entire hullabaloo, right? We're gonna be next when they came for Ukraine. Even though I'm not gonna comment on the Ukraine issue, because everyone is a fucking retard when it comes to that. Literally no one has a good take on the Ukraine fucking issue. It was this entire fucking feverish paranoia, right, that characterized the culture here. And the solution was always, okay, look, we need to get more capitalist. But then that was contrasted, right, against this like mythology, and not only the mythology of like culture, but the mythology that our grandparents had, right? Because our grandparents, at least for me, and I know for a lot of other people, came from like rural areas, right? Like it's not a common occurrence that your grandparents grew up on a farm here, right? That's something that like a lot of people have, right? And it's just something that's kind of expected, you know. So you had their grandparents in this mythology, right? Like they industrialized the country, and they went through all of these horrors of the Soviet Union, but they still built all of this fucking thing, all of this fucking industry for their children to enjoy, right? And you have this fucking that overarching mythos on top of everything, right? And then you have the mythos of our parents, right, who are like, oh, these were the young students when Estonia was fucking when the Soviet Union fell and we attained independence, right? These people, right, were the generation who built this country into the fucking global capitalist, like, cell of production or whatever the fuck, right? And like, we were just stuck between these mythologies, right? We were stuck between these contradictory narratives that our society was like telling us. And now most people could adapt, right? Most people aren't fucking autistic, so they could be like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna go get a programming job and just go to school and things will work out, right? I'll have a life, because most people want it, right? Most people want to, like, okay, look, I was a kid, like I played RuneScape like everyone else, you know, I heard all of the stories like everyone else, I read the old Soviet books, you know, I fucking was told about the virtues of global capitalism and whatever the fuck, right? But now, life is like it is, and I'm just gonna go get a job, and for most people that works, for most people, right, that's not even particularly difficult. But for someone like me, right, there's this sense of like nostalgia, right? It's like there are all of these generations before me, right, that had these great mythologies, right, that had these great fucking narratives that they went through. And I'm just stuck here in a decaying country, right, where we were told to westernize, right, and I westernized hard, right. That was a national virtue when I was growing up, right, and then people were like, oh, everyone worthwhile is leaving this country because we don't fucking have any like actual opportunities. They westernized too much. Okay, now we have to have like this fucking national revival, right? We have to make sure that our language doesn't die out, and we have to make sure that people don't leave. Like since what I was told was that westernization was good, right, and since that was the narrative that I was raised in, right, I'm like, okay, no, I don't really care about the language, I don't really care about the culture, you know, I'm just built to be like a fucking unit of culture and fucking capital, you know, and I'm supposed to reconcile that within myself, you know, I'm supposed to somehow figure out all of these contradictions and be some type of new person, right? I have to be a fucking Western person, and I've seen that throughout my life, right? Like when I was growing up, no one was dressed in Western fashion, right? Everyone was dressed in like this just really normal fucking attire, right? Like, if you've seen the fucking Horseshoe Saga, right, the type of clothes that Jesse wears, that feels normal to me, right? That isn't like, oh, that's like an antiquated fucking American hick, right? That to me is like, oh yeah, it looks like the 80s, that's normal to me, right? And the type of like decor that Jesse had in regards to like furniture and so on, right, that also looks just normal to me. That doesn't scream, oh, I'm living in my fucking mom's basement. That screams like, oh yeah, this is like when I went over to my friend's house when I was younger, you know. And like I'm from this generation, right, where my first computer I had access to was a fucking, even by like 2005 standards, it was a fucking old Macintosh. And I only had 30 minutes a day on it, you know, and now I'm supposed to be a fucking technological person. When I was, as a kid, constantly told to go outside and play, right? Even when all I wanted to do was be a technological person, you know, it's all these fucking contradictions, it's all these fucking confluences of different imperatives, right? And it's like, a lot of people really like the narrative that people are built by their society, right? People are built by the world around them and the conditions they grew up in, right? But what happens when the conditions change around you too fast to keep up with, right? Because it's not like I suddenly became an outsider. It's just that the world moved past me, you know. It's just that punk rockers no longer read fucking contemporary and classical high literature, right? It's no longer that punk rock is a part of this like mythological, liberatory fucking high culture, right? You can't learn yourself into freedom anymore. You can learn yourself into capital now, you know. Because like the the idea that education can bring you like some type of freedom was really, really alive when I was younger, and the older generation still fervently believe in that here, right? But it's just not true anymore. Education can only make you a better tool for capital, right? That's the only thing it does. And like civil society, the thing I was raised to participate in is just fucking dead. Like the cultural centers are fucking lame. It's all just fucking boring, and nothing worthwhile is coming out of anywhere. I know where to look, Like I don't know where the cool people are here, I just stay in my room and I talk to people online. So I don't live here, right? This isn't my country. My country is something that never existed, and I only heard of in myths, right? That's the nation I'm from, and my home, the place where I reside, is the fucking internet, right? This fucking RuneScape, is fucking my friends online. That's where I live, And how do you reconcile that? How do you live like this? How do you live in Loserville? But there's this inherent contradiction, right? It's like, oh, if something as cool and avant-garde and innovative as Disco Elysium can come from Estonia, right? They can't be all that bad. Like this cool thing came from it, but it didn't come from Estonia. Like that's the important part. It came from the same place where I live, except they just lived during the mythology I heard about, right? They lived during the mythology I experienced when I was staying at my grandma's house, right? And there was communist propaganda literature disguised as children's books around, right? It was where everything was just felt like it was just built for humans to agree, but it was contrasted against it, like really alienating comic books and so on and so on, right? They lived during the mythology, right? They lived through the high culture, low life fucking mythology that I've only heard about, right? They were alive when punk rock was high culture, right? Like my mom listened to Burzum. Like that anecdote will tell you fucking everything you need to know about like fucking the type of culture Estonia had. Like my dad was in the punk rock scene and my mom listened to Burzum. Now they're both fucking as capitalist as it can get, But yeah, like the people who developed Disco Elysium were also were living through this era, right? And they then migrated to the same place where I reside, right? Which is the Wired. They also are like people of the Wired, because here's how the Disco Elysium team was formed, right? First, there was this cell of like communism here, right? There was this fucking communist publication, and it was like a cultural force. Even when I was growing up, right? It was like not really relevant. I never saw anyone be a communist, right? I was never around any like not convicted, but like communists with conviction when I was growing up, right? I never came across people like that. But I knew that there were these communist publications and things like that around, right? And the people who made Disco Elysium started off as the people in charge of that publication. And then they had this side project, right? This artistic project called Nihilist FM, I think. And one of the writers who's involved in Disco Elysium wrote a story for that website which involved like some child getting raped, right? It's an art project, it's a transgressive fucking boundary pushing avant-garde publication. So that's just expected, right? And he was tried for like fucking child pornography, and it was like this entire national fucking scandal. Since justice exists in the world, he was not convicted. But it is how it is, it is how it fucking is. And then those people went on as like a subsection of a communist publication, right? They went on to make Disco Elysium as like one final art project, I guess. Because they had this cool world, right? They had this idea that they could just fucking make a video game, right? And they went and fucking made it, and it was really fucking successful, and it was really fucking innovative. It was avant-garde. It's cool. I've played the start of it. I lost my save, and I kind of, it's not really a game for me, I guess. Like, I like the aesthetical. It's aesthetically everything I want, because it comes from the exact same place where I come from, right? So it's always going to be appealing to me. But just the gameplay is too puzzle oriented for me. I don't really like puzzle games. I like more mechanical games generally. But that aside, right, it's like these people also came from the same place I came from, and they're exactly as disappointed as I am. Like, that's the important part. They themselves have been through all of these myths, right? They've lived through all of these myths, and they came away with the same conclusion that I instinctively felt, right? Like, and have been feeling for really my whole life. And that's as much proof as I need that this country just isn't redeemable at this point, you know. It might be good again in the future, right? The thing with culture is that it inherently changes, right? Culture is never stable. And like, I grew up definitely at a fucking shitty time, right? Where I was expected and forced to enjoy like fucking operas when I was like 12. Even though that was the last thing I wanted to fucking experience, you know. but like, I hope the high culture dies. I don't like high culture, and that shouldn't be a revelation, right? I don't really like going to a theatre and sitting there, right? But like, I like a good book. Like, to an extent, I am thankful that I couldn't really use computers as much as a kid, right? Because I know how easily, right, I get distracted by them, right? To an extent, I'm glad that I learned how to love literature, because literature to this day is my favorite thing in the world, right? It's my great love to an extent. But fucking, it still fucking sucked, you know. It still fucking sucked. Like, I didn't. It was as destructive as it was beneficial, you know. And in the future, there might be a new generation with a new movement here, right? There might be some fucking, like, the kids running around right now, right, might grow up to be my age, right? And they might be fucking some fucking cultural geniuses, right? They might see all the fucking flaws in this culture and decide, like, look, we've had enough. We're gonna build our own. We're gonna have a cool atmosphere, right? We're gonna have some fucking worthwhile art coming out of this fucking godforsaken country. But that's not my generation, right? That's not me, you know, to an extent, right? Because I don't want to enhance the country, because the country isn't enhancing me, right? It's like I don't fucking care about local culture. I just want to be in the wired, you know. I will always remember where I came from, right? I'll remember fucking being at my grandma's, reading old Soviet literature about children in fucking kolkhozes. Like, I'll remember that, and I'll appreciate that as a part of my own history. But I've migrated, like, for all intents and purposes. I live in the wired now, right? That's a place I want to improve, right? I want to leave the wired a better place than it was when I arrived here, you know? And if our culture dies, it'll be better for it, because some new culture can be born. And it can avoid these fucking mistakes. It can avoid this perpetual fucking series of massive mistakes, one after the other, you know. It'll be possible to improve. To an extent, Estonia is just a country of the spectacle, you know. Our culture is one of perpetual mythologies. Like, it's this contradictory, like, environment where we really, really intensely preserve our old myths, right? It's like just these dead fucking ideas, right? And they're just kept around for the sake of continuing them, right? there's this Junji Ito story, which I really appreciate. It's one of my favorite ones, where there's a guy, right? There's a guy and there's a girl, as happens in most Junji Ito stories, right? And the girl comes up to the guy, and they want to get married, right? And the guy says like, look, we have a family tradition, and I'm gonna be a part of it. And the girl is like, yeah, that seems reasonable. That seems fair, right? And then everything is kind of weird. And the eventual reveal, right? The eventual reveal is that the family tradition is sticking your father's head on top of your head, right? Which is then connected to this fucking snake of heads, right? And it's just this really fucking visceral imagery, right? It's this really intense reflection of how culture manifests when it's passed on in the form of like these traditions, right? And I feel like the culture here is very similar, right? And I feel like it's necessary that it stops to a large extent, because it's like, it's not just that we have like a preserved history that we appreciate, right? Like when we became independent, right? A lot of the movies that were made right here were about peasant revolts, right? that was the culture. We just made movies about peasant revolts. And aside from that, right, it's like there are these old myths about everything around here. Like there's a rock in a park, and that rock was a rock where offerings were made to the gods, you know, centuries ago. And there's a lake, and these are the mythologies of the lake, right? You have, like, this is actually like the best example. In the capital, there's a lake, right? And the lake has a myth associated with it, and that's like there's this guy that comes out of the lake, and he comes up to you and asks, hey, is the capital built yet? And if the capital is built and you say yes, he'll just flood the capital, right? So you have to say no. And the purpose of this myth is like two-sided, right? First of all, it's like, okay, this lake is alive, right? It has a spirit within it. Also, do you see that there's just a fucking upside-down house there? That's fucking wacky. That's fucking wacky. But anyways, like, but then the second one is like the one of like never-ending progress, where the capital has to be constantly built, right? Where we can't stop with the progress. We have to keep going, and if we finish, the lake will flood and we'll all be fucking dead, you know? And that's just kind of the ethos of the country. We represent these ideas of like boundless progress by referring back to like these fucking myths, right? And our big cultural like fucking claim, even when I was a kid, right, was how much of an oral history we have, right? Look, we had this giant oral tradition, right? But by the time we were born, that was dead. No one was conveying it anymore, right? It all died, right? But there was just like this one guy who recorded like all of these old Estonian songs, right, that were passed on, and there was this generation of writers who was really invested. There were multiple generations, so like there was this like movement of writers who all were really invested in like old Estonian myths. So they modernized and repurposed them, right? And like if you go walk around, you'll often see like monuments to like fucking old Estonian deities or old Estonian pagan religions and stuff like that. So like it's like we're pretending to be an old country, right? We're pretending to have all of these traditions, even though they're all dead, right? Some of them are alive, like I'm not gonna say that they're all dead, but most of them are. Like we don't have Halloween, at least we didn't when I was a kid. We probably have Halloween now. Like if what I've seen around me is right, we probably have replaced our fucking native rituals or whatever the fuck with Halloween. Because like our version was just everyone dressed up as old men and went around asking for candy and shit like that, and like fucking it was distinct, it was unique, it was still alive, but like it's dying, you know. We're getting westernized because our traditions to an extent are progress, right? And it's just It's fucking bullshit, right? And we have all of these like fucking narratives and myths around the fucking World Wars too, right? We fucking like not to a similar extent, right? Because we're not that overboard, right? But like we celebrate our independence, right? But we have multiple independences, right? Because we've been free and reconquered, right? So it's like, okay, we have this independence where we became like finally really free, right? And then we have that independence where we were kind of free, and so on and so on and so on, right? And it's like fucking like like we celebrate the peace treaty in the First World War, which led like 30 years of independence, right? That was the first Estonia, as we call it. And now we're living in the second Estonia or something like that. It's also fucking dumb. It's also fucking dumb, right? And they're like, oh, we resisted for so long against the culture imperialism of the Soviets, right? We don't speak Russian, we have Estonian, we have our culture, right? And it's like, the more and more time goes by, we just have images of culture, right? We don't actually have any of that. We haven't had any culture for a while now. We have once every 4 years a event where everyone comes together, right? Like a third of the country is there and people sing old Estonian songs and it's live streamed on fucking your computer. If you want to watch it, then you pay for the tickets, but it's a national event. It's very, we have a culture, we have traditions, we're strong, and the tradition itself was also an image, right? It's how the spectacle works. Like the tradition wasn't something that was like organic, right? Because this type of narrative was deliberately set up, right? It wasn't that we actually had like this continuous exchange of history, right? It was never that like, oh, the elders passed this down to us. No, there was this Estonian revivalism kinda, where all of these people in the early 20th century and the late 19th century just went around and recorded like old Estonian folk stories and just created a mythology, right? It was an artificial mythology. It wasn't like it was organic. So there was this like giant national culture, right? That itself was built as an image 100 years ago. And then we've just been adding on top of it and adding on top of it, right? And now we're in a state, right, where we're just preserving traditions and myths that weren't even really there and have already disappeared, right? It's this really fucked up state, like it's all just so fucking rotten. It's all just so fucking pointless, right? There's no reason that things should be this way, right? It's just pointless to try to accomplish anything here. And we're the success story, right? We're the success story. And like this entire social condition, you know, is probably the best exemplified by where I live, right? It's really well demonstrated by my own surroundings, right? So where I live, right, my neighbors are either college students renting, right, the petit bourgeois, right, or just old people who have lived there for God knows how long. And then there's my mom, right, who just decided that she will invest in property instead of renting and spent a lot of her life paying it off and eventually ended up with a really good deal, right? Because the neighborhood where I am, right, it used to be this rundown neighborhood. Like there were some government facilities there weren't anything special. There were some fucking people living in there, just normal people, right? But then now I live next to like 2 mansions with like 2 fucking families of like actual fucking millionaires. And they're just fucking next to me for some reason, you know, now. It used to be like, oh, this was a university building, right? This was a college building where we could play around in as kids, right? We could fucking climb up no, that's not the word. Dilapidated fucking metal staircase, right? We could fuck around. We could run around the fucking like park next to our house. We could get into fucking conflict with the neighbor kids, right? As we were fucking, as our myths told us to kind of do, right? Because it was like, we lived in like the real world, right? It was a real world. You fought over territory for fucking stupid reasons with the neighbor kids, right? And you ran around parks and you fucked around in old fucking buildings. And it was cool. It was really fucking cool, you know. It felt like living in a fucking world, you know. And now this place is a walled-off mansion inhabited by some fucking millionaire who built a shopping center, right? And then there's just another place where I used to like where we could just fuck around in before, right? We never really fucked around here because there were like fences and shit, right? But we could just like look it up. We could like, it was another like, cool building, right? And that's also mentioned now. Just some other millionaires have like this fucking automatic gate and who have like these fucking weird hoverboards or whatever the fuck, right? And it's just the fucking Western bourgeois, right? Fucking invading the real world I used to live in, right? And fucking in my summers, right? I used to go to the fucking commie block my grandma lived in, or I used to go to the country house that some of my family had built, right? And that was close to like my great grandparents my great grandfather had been like a fucking fireman in the Soviet Union, right? And they had fucking bees, they kept bees, right? It was the fucking real world, right? Both of my grandmas had like their own gardens, right? Where we could just go and fucking eat food. I still can do that, right? That's still available to me. But that was just the expected status quo to a certain extent, right? And now that's a novelty, right? Now that's something slightly strange, you know, it's like, just because like that's the way we've grown up. And I was talking about like I fucking to fucking old Estonia, just the country has left me behind, but like to the extent I'm not, right? Because it wasn't like I'm just like, oh, I'm a country person. I live in the country. I'm used to like rural life or whatever the fuck. You know. I was a product of the cities, right? I was a product of the culture, and that culture necessarily meant like an avoidance of like fucking rural traditions, you know. Because I can't be like, oh, I'm the meat and potatoes Estonian, you know, I grow my own potatoes, I eat the meat I raise, you know, I'm just not that person, because my parents weren't those people, right? They grew up like that, I grew up in an image of that, you know, but they themselves moved beyond that, right? Like, the inherent ideology of like progress, right, means that you will have to leave that nostalgia behind, and you will want to leave that behind, because in all honesty, the way Estonians cook meat and potatoes is shit. You don't want to eat it. It's fucking under-seasoned, overcooked, tastes like shit. You don't want fucking, you don't want that. It's bad, right? But it's like, it might be bad, but that's just why I was raised on, you know. And I was raised to want more. I was raised to just be like, okay, I'm gonna innovate in this, right? And it's just that innovation is just fucking going to McDonald's, really. And like, I'm just trying to come to grips with this, you know. It's like, how do you cope with a situation that was always destined to be shit, that was always destined to be garbage, that was always destined to be pointless and fruitless, but it created you, right? You were the conclusion to this fucking spectacle, right? You are the reality born out of the spectacle, right? How do you live like that? How do you live in a world like that? Do you make weird avant-garde albums about how punk rock is dead? Do you make fucking weird YouTube vlogs about fucking how much you hate this state of culture where you live, right? That's what I know how to do, you know. That's all I know how to do. I don't know how to make it better, you know. I can't make it better because I know I'll get back home, you know. I'll leave the real world because the real world doesn't have anything really for me, you know. Even though it was nice to dip my toes in it, you know, it was nice to be like, yeah, you know, I'm gonna just let myself be consumed by these fucking images and let myself be consumed by these sensations, right? That was nice. It was a nice experience. But I'm going back home, right? I'm going to go back to just being a neat, and I'm gonna go back to just fucking eating pasta with cheese and fucking sausage because that's what I eat, you know. I'm going back to just not having a direction, you know, and just fucking making weird art because I'm not good enough to make non-weird art, or I'm not bad enough to not make non-weird art. I can only make the art that I want to make, you know. I can't make art that anyone else wants to see, really, and I can just hope that people want to see what I want to make, you know. It's just how it is. And I can't reconcile any of this. I can't feel like, look, this is what I was fucking born to do. Like, this is where I am supposed to be in this society, you know. Because I'm not supposed to be in this society. I was supposed to be in a mythological society, you know. I'm supposed to be in an idea of an idea of an idea, you know. I was supposed to be in a folk song, transcribed and retranslated, you know. And then fucking those folk songs, by the way, are now transformed into metal and punk songs, because metal and punk bands looked at those folk songs and were like, yo, these are cool, let's transform them into fucking our music, you know. And it's oftentimes it's not even a real folk song, you know, just an image of a folk song, because that's just how it fucking goes. Just so fucking dumb. It's so fucking dumb, because it's like all good art comes from inspirations, you know. And you can be inspired by the art you consume, and you can be inspired by your environment, right? My environment is as desolate as it gets, and my artistic inspirations can barely be translated into my own art, you know. I can take a format from No Thank You, you know. I can take some specific techniques from other people, but I can't make one of their videos, you know. I'm a completely different person. I have different interests, I have different other inspirations, and it always feels like I'm playing catch up, you know. It's like, okay, I can listen to my friend's favorite albums, you know, but I'll be listening to my friend's favorite albums. Where am I supposed to find my own favorite albums from, you know? It's like I don't know where to start. I don't know how to find my own place, you know. I'm always just stuck retreading where other people have gone before. And it's gotten to a point where I don't even know what I want. It's gotten to a point where I can only express things without any purpose, right? It's not like I'm particularly trying to evoke an emotion. It's not like I'm particularly trying to tell you anything that you can apply to your own life. It's just, I'm just looking at the world around me, and the only thing I can express is desolation. The only thing I can express is a suburban imperialism crawling onto all of my fucking day-to-day activities, you know. And I just know the transformation. I know the myths. I know what it used to be, you know. I can see the fucking deprecated fucking buildings that used to be used for something, but now just stand here useless, you know. I can see the fucking Soviet landmarks, right? The bunkers, the fucking raw concrete tossed aside here and there, and I can see some project, you know. It was not great, but something was being built, you know. And that's something just doesn't exist now, and there's a part of me, right, that wishes that I could have like this type of conviction, that wishes I could be like this fucking authoritarian person or participate in mandatory individualism or have any beliefs like that at all, but I just don't. All I have is just not belonging anywhere. That's just my entire life, really.